Welcome to Inspired Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change. My apologies for the last episode. It was a little bit late, so I wasn't quite on target with Father's Day, but that's okay. It got there. I hope you all had a listen and found it valuable, or at least thought-provoking, which is always something that I want to encourage. So, a couple of things. One is an announcement, and that is that recently I was interviewed by a wonderful woman called Karen Sander, who launched a program called Aging Fearlessly, and her website's www.agingfearlessly.com. Karen's on a mission basically to encourage people over 50 to be active and involved in the world around them in order to really improve their longevity and their quality of life. And I'm a big promoter of that, especially for us as men. And I might sort of dig into that a little bit at another time. But right now, I just want to put in a plug because I had the opportunity to be interviewed by Karen, and we really had a bit of a fun time. She's very curious. She asked some very insightful questions, and we could have probably chatted for a whole day on the topic, and that was essentially about, men and going from good to great, and what are some of the challenges that we face, both conscious and subconscious. That program is going to air as of Sunday midnight. So I'd like you all, and I want to encourage you all to sort of check in with it. Karen has a host of other interviews and podcasts and stuff that are really fascinating. We often at the moment are caught up, and rightly so in some respects, to focus on youth, children and youth. And admittedly, especially for teenagers, as I keep pointing out, mental health statistics are not good, and we need to get creative about sorting that out. But at the other end of the spectrum are issues that people in the third age also, I think, need to address, but are left out in the conversation often, especially men. We as men often create our own problem in that, because the moment we move towards stepping out of our careers and our jobs and so on, we step into a bit of a vacuum, a void, because a lot of times our identity has been so wrapped up in that business card or whatever it says on the shop window, or my trade relationships and all of that. And so, that, as I always talk about, that opportunity to learn how to be and understand myself is usually just firmly located in what I do. But that's not the whole of me. And again, I want to encourage men to reflect on that. So there's an opportunity here to delve into this particular stage of our lives. Okay, so please tune in. Love some feedback. So Karen is a wonderful woman, as I said, and she's very insightful, and she has got a wealth of experience to share, and she brings on some really interesting people onto her podcast. So let me move into today's topic. So one of the things we've been talking about is, this whole thing about parenting, attachment. How do I get my child to an adolescent? How do I get that adolescent to be, emotionally regulated, responsive, ethical, moral, all those sorts of things. Okay? And within it, embedded in this about the how-to, one of the things that I want to emphasize today is a deeper reflection of what do you think your child sees and experiences in its relationship with you. Okay. And this is where the rubber hits the road, because I'm going to be asking you, all of those men and women who are parents, to sit back and begin to think about your part in the challenges with your child and teenager. Okay, so it's ownership. When I work with couples, one of the things that I make very clear to both parties is that I expect each person to take responsibility, to take ownership for their part in the problem in the relationship. It's not just blaming the other. That is, to me, that is an unacceptable and an avoidant behavior that we can't sustain. And interestingly enough, kids are particularly sensitive to that, and they will make sure you hear about it. So let's begin to break that down a little bit. So the idea here is not now so much focusing on the child, but I want everybody to take a bit of a sort of personal audit. And part of that personal audit is to contemplate, firstly, what are my core values in how I live? Now, values are really interesting in the sense that, I was once standing in the queue at my bank waiting to do some banking. This is many years ago. I tend not to do that anymore, but most of it's electronic anyway, so why bother going into a branch? And quite often you're redirected to a website anyway, even when you've gone into it. Enough of that. I could have a soapbox moment there, but what I'm talking about is values, right? And so I'm standing in this queue in the bank and I'm looking ahead, and there is the bank's value statement. Now, I can't remember off the top of my head what they were specifically, but it was quite a list, which irritated me in the first place. And secondly, the thing that I became very, very conscious of was that what they were espousing actually often didn't translate into the actions in the bank. So that's an important aspect to what I want everybody to think about. What are your professed values and what are the actual values in action? Now, as we talked about earlier on in terms of making good men great, and the core values in patriarchy is to be territorial, to be hierarchical, status conscious, to be acquisitional, and to be competitive. And if the ball gets out of the playing field, then we get combative. Right? We move into a space of wanting to be, dominant and controlling of the other or the situation. Okay. Now, again, think about this both on the level of you being a partner in a relationship, but also being a parent. Okay, so the first question I want you to ask is, are my espoused values articulated in my actions? And no blame, but if they're not, it's probably really worthwhile working on narrowing the gap. Okay? So if I speak about, I love my child, and, I say to the, person, I love you, I need to think about, are my interactions with that child, with that teenager, based on being loving, right? If I talk about, being cooperative, right, sharing, do I demonstrate that? Because sure as hell, at some point, if you're not, especially a teenager, is going to call you on it. They will not let you off the hook. It will become a constant conflict within your relationship. Okay, so that's the first aspect of it. The next aspect is, do I really demonstrate living in essence in alignment with myself. Okay, so I talk about a framework with most of the guys about, we need to get stuff happening physically, i.e., being able to, change gears in a sense. I use a motor car analogy often. So, can I get into high levels of activity and then be able to switch down and relax and calm down? So that's the next one. The next level is level 2 in the pyramid, a little like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is my psychological needs. And I talk about, how I think, is especially important. Hamlet, things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes them so. It's right on track. But it's not just my internal dialogue, it's what that dialogue's based on. So back to values, attitudes, beliefs. Okay, I need to examine those very, very closely, because kids growing up in a family, in a community, absorb stuff often, subconsciously, non-verbally. So, how healthy are my values, my beliefs, my attitudes, and how is that reflected in my thinking? So, do I feel, for example, well in my relationship with myself, or am I highly self-critical constantly? And how might that come across in my behaviour? Because quite often we're not really that conscious about that. So, in the next aspect is, well, my values, beliefs, attitudes, prior experiences, internal dialogue are going to have a significant impact on my emotional regulation, how I express myself. Now, this is where it gets sticky, because for many of us in our culture, there are two particular issues around that. One is what's referred to as low frustration tolerance, and the other one is immediate needs gratification. Okay, so let me flip that on its head. Let's talk about immediate needs gratification first. So essentially, it boils down to, in order for me to feel happy, safe, secure, I need to have what I want right now. No delay. I'm not going to delay gratification. So I do a lot of work with, people, but again, mainly men, and some of them struggle with delaying gratification. They want things now. So hence the banking industry has made an enormous amount of profit off the back of most of us, because we have a tendency to use our credit cards and borrow money, often for stuff that you probably need to ask yourself, do you really need it? Okay, do I need, and this is my personal experience, 15 surfboards sitting in my garage? Do I need to stack 5 of them in the back of my car when I go for a surf? Well, probably 1 or 2 would do. Right, now, I speak from experience on that. I do have a garage that doesn't have quite 50 surfboards in it, but it's got a few. Some of them have I'm emotionally attached to them. They have sentimental value. Others are just bloody valuable. We'll keep that little fact to ourselves. But the point that I'm making is that we often just impulse buy or impulse use. One of the problems in addictions is that very thing. It's about, I need to anaesthetize my inner suffering immediately. I can't tolerate to experience that. And that brings me to the second bit, which is frustration tolerance. So, am I the sort of person that gets short really quickly, who can't sort of step back and step down and go, okay, so I'm very frustrated now. That's okay. Let me just process this. Let me get through it. Because with the combination of immediate needs gratification and low frustration tolerance, I'm going to feel certainly internally more stressed, but I'm going to project that onto the world, especially my kids. And in the current COVID lockdown for us, one of the big challenges is that we're stressed anyway. not all of us. Some of us are really enjoying the solitude, the lack of required stimulation that society often places on us. But a lot of us are trying to work from home, homeschool kids, uh, and with a sort of minimum of support in a way. So of course we're going to be challenged. Firstly, we're going to be stressed. Now, when we're stressed, that whole thing about immediate needs gratification or lack of frustration tolerance is going to come into the spotlight. So part of this process is that when I'm around my kids, whether they're 5 or 15, I need to really self-regulate. I need to be able to, delay gratification, i.e., okay, she hasn't taken out the garbage bin. That doesn't mean I need to fly off the handle. That might just require a bit of a dialogue and seeing what the problem is and really communicating in a meaningful way. And in one of the sessions or podcasts, I'm going to talk a bit about non-violent communication, which is, I think, a really nice, comprehensive way of dealing at times with communicating, especially with teenagers. There are some hitches with it, but overall, I think it's a really good model. It's like assertive communication. Things like, when you did or didn't do this is how I felt because I thought this, and what I need from you is that. That's actually a really simple, elegant formula to operate with. Now, one of the things that I get, often from people is they push back a little bit and go, oh, well, that's very stilted. I like to be more spontaneous. Well, spontaneity often gets us into a hell of a hole and into deep trouble. And, again, we really do need to be conscious and intentional in our interaction with our partner and especially with our kids, because they're going to take that on board. They're going to model it. They're going to throw it back at us. So how, do I, increase my ability to delay gratification, to meet those needs immediately? Well, some of it's practice, but here's a particularly important point. At this point, a lot of people, coaches, therapists, blah, 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 teachers will go, it's just willpower. And I disagree. Willpower is not going to get you across the line. It might get you across the line occasionally, from time to time, but the tension will continue to increase. This is a change that's going to come from the depth of your being and soul. This is the desire, to be different. I had a conversation with a high school student the other day, and she wanted to know about how do I, who can motivate me? And I went, whoa, wrong question. The question is, how can I motivate myself? Now, I don't usually call questions wrong, but in this case, I was a bit spontaneous, and to me, it just wasn't going to address the issue. Okay, motivation does not come from others or circumstances or situations. It comes from within myself because I understand and I resonate with that whatever it is I'm about to do is in my best interest long term. Right? So here we've got that, the focus is on long term. Immediate needs gratification is short term. I want to drink that bottle of wine now. I want to get that surfboard now. I want to buy that bag now. Or, I need to take out a loan to do it. That's okay. We'll figure it out as we go along. And then suddenly, circumstances change. People are moving into an economically challenged place in a lot of instances. What are they going to do with that? We need to think about the bigger picture at times, but it's important to be clear about the why. Why do I want this? And if it's simply because it's like an alcohol or a drug or gambling, it just immediately anesthetizes whatever emotions I've got going on at the time that I'm not in touch with, and I need to work that through. We can't move through life in an unconscious way. Well, we can, but it's pretty painful, difficult. and often gets us into some serious trouble with either loved ones or, in some instances, with the law. You know, a lot of crime is impulsive, especially a lot of property crime. Also, like in a lot of instances, white-collar crime. You know, a person's figured out a scam. The scam's there to give them X, so they'll do it. If you're curious about that, watch Wolf of Wall Street as an example. Okay, so here we come to the point. This is take an audit. You know, what are my values? What are they? You know, do they match with my actions? Do they match with who I am when I interact with someone in a difficult circumstance? How can I remain, as a parent, loving, respectful, you know, demonstrate cooperation, demonstrating how you can regulate your feelings. Kids are going to crack it. They're going to give you a hard time. That's, in a sense, you know, if you want to be a bit obtuse, their job, right? And if I respond appropriately, not only am I going to, you know, be a better person for it, but they are too. And we're going to have a flourishing, loving, respectful relationship with some bump along the way. It's just part of the picture. And on that note, remember there is no perfection. And change is stressful, but you get a hell of a return on investment. Until next time, this is me signing off.
Listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Gunter Swoboda does individual and group coaching for men looking to grow. For more information on this and the global Making Good Men Great movement, check out goodmengreat.com to get into contact. If you have a topic for the show or would like to be a guest on the air, please email producers at miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda, Miranda, at noirtainment, noirtainment.com. Thank you, and always keep inspiring change.